The confession came from the wrong man. That is the only way to say it. The only way that captures what happened in the interrogation room of the Millfield Police Department on the afternoon of October 3, 2019, when a man named Arthur Cole sat down across from Detective Nina Reeves and told her, in careful and specific detail, that he had killed a woman named Sandra Marsh 18 months earlier. The problem was that Arthur Cole had not killed Sandra Marsh. Nina knew this before he finished his second sentence. She knew it because she had been working the Sandra Marsh case for 18 months. She knew it because she had spent 18 months learning everything there was to know about Sandra Marsh and the night she died and the man who had taken her life. She knew it because she had 6 weeks ago identified that man with a certainty she had not yet been able to translate into an arrest. And that man was not Arthur Cole. She let him finish. She wrote down everything he said, and then she asked him the question that she already knew the answer to. She said, "Arthur, why are you telling me this?" Arthur Cole was 67 years old. He was a retired school teacher. He had taught 6th grade for 31 years at a school on the east side of Millfield. He had, by every account from everyone who had ever known him, spent his life being exactly what he appeared to be. A quiet, dedicated man who cared about children and learning and not much else. He was also, Nina had established in the 2 hours before this conversation, terminally ill. Pancreatic cancer, 4 to 6 months according to his doctor. He had received the diagnosis 3 weeks ago. He sat across from Nina with the stillness of someone who has made a decision and arrived at peace with it. He said, "I'm telling you this because I'm going to die anyway, and because my son needs to be protected." Nina said, "Your son?" Arthur said, "My son didn't mean for it to happen. He's a good man. He made a terrible mistake and it has eaten him alive for 18 months and I cannot watch him carry it for the rest of his life when I'm not going to be here much longer anyway." He said, "I killed Sandra Marsh. That is my confession. I am prepared to sign whatever you need me to sign." Nina looked at him for a long moment. She said, "Tell me exactly what happened." He told her. Every detail was wrong. Sandra Marsh had been 41 years old when she died. She was a real estate agent. She had been found in her car in a parking structure on the west side of the city at 6:15 a.m. on a Monday morning by a parking attendant who had noticed the car had been there since the previous evening. The cause of death was blunt force trauma. A single blow to the back of the head. It had been quick, the medical examiner had said. She had not suffered long. The parking structure served a restaurant and a cinema. Sandra had attended a work dinner at the restaurant on the Sunday evening. She had left the dinner at approximately 10:30 p.m. She had been found in her car at 6:15 a.m. the following morning. 7.5 hours unaccounted for. No witnesses to what had happened in that parking structure. No physical evidence that had led conclusively anywhere. 18 months of investigation, and Nina was 6 weeks from an arrest on a man named Victor Hale, who had been at the same work dinner, who had left shortly after Sandra, whose phone had pinged a cell tower adjacent to the parking structure at 11:04 p.m., and who had, in 18 months of careful investigation, demonstrated a capacity for controlled, deliberate deception that Nina had rarely encountered. She was 6 weeks from an arrest, and now an old man was sitting across from her confessing to the crime. She let Arthur finish. She took his signed statement. She thanked him. She had a colleague take him to a waiting area and bring him a cup of tea. Then she went to find her partner. His name was James. He was 39 years old. He had been her partner for 6 years, and he was, in Nina's estimation, the best investigative mind she had ever worked with. She told him what had happened. He said, "The confession is false." She said, "Every detail is wrong." He said, "Does he know it's false?" She said, "He knows his son didn't kill Sandra Marsh. He doesn't know who did." James said, "He's trying to protect his son from something his son didn't do," Nina said, "which means his son thinks he did it." They looked at each other. James said, "Who is his son?" Arthur Cole's son was named Michael. He was 41 years old. He worked as an accountant at a firm downtown. He was married with 2 children. He had also, Nina discovered when she pulled his records, been at the restaurant on the night Sandra Marsh died. Not at the work dinner, at the bar. A different event. A birthday gathering for a friend that had been held in the restaurant's private bar area. Cole had been in the same building as Sandra Marsh on the night she died. Nina drove to his office. Michael Cole was a thin man with the particular appearance of someone who has not been sleeping well for a long time. He looked at Nina's badge with an expression that she recognized. He had been expecting her. Not today, specifically. But he had been expecting someone, eventually. You could see it in the particular quality of his relief when she introduced herself. The relief of someone whose dread has finally resolved into something concrete. She told him, carefully, that his father had come to the station that morning. Something moved across Michael Cole's face. He said, "Oh, Dad." He said it quietly, to no one in particular. Then he said, "He didn't do it." Nina said, "I know." He looked at her. She said, "I need you to tell me what happened that night." Michael had left the birthday gathering at approximately 10:45 p.m. He had been drinking. Not excessively, but enough. He had taken the elevator to the parking structure, rather than the stairs, because the stairs were at the far end of the building, and the elevator was closer to the bar. The elevator had opened on level 3. He had walked to his car, which was parked near the elevator on level 3, and he had seen, as he walked past another car, parked 20 meters from his own, a woman slumped against the driver's side window. He had stopped. He had looked. He had seen that she was not moving. He had, in the particular panic of a man who has had several drinks and found himself adjacent to something terrible, made a decision that he had regretted every day for 18 months. He had gotten into his car. He had driven away. He had told himself as he drove that she was probably sleeping, that she had probably had too much to drink, that someone else would find her, that calling the police would involve questions about where he had been and what he had been drinking, and whether he had any involvement in whatever had happened to this woman he had never met. He had told himself all of these things. He had gone home. He had seen the news the following morning, and he had understood, with a certainty that had not left him in 18 months, that the woman slumped against the window had not been sleeping. He said, "I should have called. I know that. I have known it every single day." He said, "She might have still been alive when I found her." The medical examiner said she survived for some time after the blow. "I might have been able to get help in time." He said, "I have to live with that." Nina said, "You didn't hurt her." He said, "I left her there. She said, "I know, but you didn't hurt her." She said, "The man who hurt her is still out there, and I need your help to make sure he doesn't stay that way." Michael Cole's account placed him at the scene at approximately 10:50 p.m. Victor Hale's phone had pinged the adjacent cell tower at 11:04 p.m. Michael had left before Victor arrived. He had seen Sandra alive, or what he believed was alive, slumped but breathing, at 10:50 p.m. Victor had arrived 14 minutes later. Michael's testimony did not directly implicate Victor, but it established a timeline that the prosecution, when Nina finally made the arrest 6 weeks later, used to significant effect. It established that Sandra had been alive at 10:50 p.m. It established that someone had arrived 14 minutes later, and it closed the window of possibility that the defense had been planning to use. The argument that Sandra's death could have occurred earlier in the evening and that Victor's presence at 11:04 p.m. was coincidental. It was not coincidental. Victor Hale was arrested on a Thursday morning. He maintained his composure throughout. He had the resources and the preparation of someone who had anticipated this possibility and had spent 18 months building his defense against it. His attorney was formidable. The trial lasted 4 weeks. Michael Cole testified. He stood in the witness box and told in full what he had done and what he had not done on the night of October 3rd, 2017. He told it without excuse and without deflection. He described the decision he had made and what it had cost him. The defense attorney asked, "If you had called the police, she might have survived. Is that correct?" Michael said, "Yes." The attorney said, "And you chose not to call." Michael said, "Yes, and I will regret that for the rest of my life. But I did not hurt her. And the man who did hurt her is sitting at that table." He looked at Victor Hale. Victor looked back with the controlled expression of a man who has decided that control is still available to him. It was not. Victor Hale was convicted of murder in the first degree. He was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. Michael Cole was charged separately with failure to render aid and obstruction of justice. He pleaded sentence and community service, reflecting the court's consideration of the circumstances and his cooperation with the investigation. He accepted the sentence without appeal. Arthur Cole lived long enough to hear the verdict. He died 4 months later, in the spring, in a hospital room with Michael at his bedside. He had, in his final months, told Michael what he had done, what he had tried to do. He had sat with his son and explained that he had walked into a police station and confessed to a murder his son hadn't committed, because he was dying anyway, and he could not leave his son to carry the weight of it alone. Michael had not known what to say. He had sat with his father for a long time in silence. Then he had said, "You shouldn't have done that." Arthur had said, "I know, but you're my son." Nina Reeves closed the Sandra Marsh case file on a Tuesday afternoon. She had kept it open for over 2 years. She had carried it through 18 months of investigation and 6 weeks of careful final work and a trial that had lasted 4 weeks and a sentencing that had taken another 2 months. She closed the file. She sat at her desk for a while. She thought about Arthur Cole, who had walked into a police station and offered his remaining months in exchange for his son's peace of mind. She thought about Michael Cole, who had driven past a woman in a parking structure and made a choice he could not unmake. She thought about Victor Hale, who had arrived in a parking structure 14 minutes later and made a choice of his own. She thought about Sandra Marsh, 41 years old, a real estate agent, found in her car on a Monday morning by a parking attendant who had noticed the car had been there since the previous evening. She thought about how many people's decisions had converged on that parking structure on that Sunday night in October, and how only one of those decisions had ended a life, and how in the end it had taken all the others to account for it. She put the file away. She went home. This story is fictional and created for entertainment purposes only.